you want to get rid of the FCC too, huh?
No, sure, of course.
Get rid of the Federal Communications Commission.
Course.
If you can buy, you would regulate. I mean, we got to have some control over the airwaves.
No. No, what I would do would be to have the Federal Communications Commission have a big auction at which they would auction off all the present television and radio licenses.
And then only fat cats would own radio and television stations,
nonsense.
which many detractors say is the situation now.
Well, first place, there are many of them, and many people could come in and compete with them. Do only fat cats? We were talking about airlines. Only fat cats own airlines? No, anybody here can buy a share of stock in United Airlines or in TWA in the same way with.
So they'd be publicly held, and stockholders could dissent if they didn't like the commercials, if the commercials were too loud?
Well, they could sell, if they thought that the company, the station wasn't doing a good job, they could sell their stock. Much more effective than voting in Washington, because each individual separately can decide what to do. But more important, if you once made it into private property, it would be not subject to the fairness doctrine. You would have the same kind of free press on radio and television that you now have in the newspapers.
Are you going to trust me to put all of the candidates on my program? Or am I just going to put my favorite candidate?
Put your favorite on, and some other station will put its favorite on. You do not get fairness by every individual program being fair. You do not get fairness by every individual station get fairness. In any event, I'm not in favor of fairness. I'm in favor of freedom. And freedom is not fairness. Fairness means somebody has to decide what's fair. And that means the FCC people have to decide what's fair. I don't want the FCC people to decide for me what I should listen to or hear. And you wouldn't be able, if the public at large didn't agree with your choices, you'd be out of business.
Yeah, I would.
So you know, it's a funny thing. People think that it's the appearance of power versus the reality of power. It looks like as if you have a lot of power over what you put on your show, but you don't.
Really?
Because if you didn't appeal to the public, if these people didn't like you, do a marvelous job. I'm not questioning that. But you do a marvelous job because you have found an audience for your product.
So in other words, my power comes from the people, is your point.
Absolutely.
And if I just put on all of my favorites, then the public will clearly see that Donahue was sold out and their eye.
Look, I've been reading your book. It's a good book, and I recommend it to you just as he recommended mine. But in that book, you point out the difficulties you had getting into New York.
Yes.
Suppose you had to have government permission to go into New York. Do you think you would have had it any easier? Do you think you could have had as much independence as you've had?
Mm-hmm. And under the Friedman laissez-faire broadcasting system, there would have been more opportunities for this from Dayton, Ohio to get into New York.
Absolutely. There would have been more stations. There would have been, instead of 3 big networks, you would have had a much broader group of stations. You would have been able to break in much sooner. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it would have happened.